we're good to go.
Hey, excuse me, Mr. Attorney.
Good evening, everyone. Just wanted to welcome you all to the FY23 Commissioner's Budget public hearing, and I'll turn it over to Commissioner Hance to open the meeting.
So first of all, can I get a motion to reconvene the May 17th, 2022 meeting of the Calvert County Board of Commissioners?
So moved.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second that we reconvene the May 17th, 2022 meeting of the Calvert County Board of Commissioners. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
So good evening, everybody. I'm Buddy Hance, President of the Calvert County Board of Commissioners, and we are here tonight on our public hearing for the Commissioner's budget for FY23. So the budget for FY23 is a little over $335 million, and I said recently at a forum that if you'd have told me not too long ago that the budget for Calvert County was going to be $335 million, I would have laughed in your face, but here we are. The budget proposal that we have before you tonight has been the hard work of our Finance and Budget Department. So I want to thank Director Strand and all of her staff for all their work to put the budget together for us tonight. It's not an easy task to put our budget together. There are always changes, and it's a very long process. We'll start the 24 budget process sometime next September to start working on the 24 budget. So you barely get this one enacted, and you start working on the next one. But do want to thank Director Strand and all of her staff for their efforts, and all the department heads. You know, there's lots of need out there, and it's our job to go through those requests and to weed out, you know, what we think we can afford and what we can't. You know, we always have been very conservative in our estimates. You know, especially we don't want to get caught mid-year with revenues that aren't up to where we thought they should be. So, you know, we'd rather end the year with a surplus than end the year in a deficit. So that does make it a little hard on our budget decisions as we move through the process. And this year there is you will see, if you have not already seen, there is a significant increase for our staff. You know, we determined this year the their Sheriff's Department was concerned about the salary levels for their officers based on what's going on in this country currently. Around us, and the state's been raising salaries pretty rapidly, and we weren't keeping up, and it makes it hard for us to recruit officers, which are very important to us here in Calvert County. So going through that process, we also did an analysis of our own staff, and what we found was for many years our staff has been used to balance budgets, and they didn't receive steps or increases like they should have received. So it is significant this year, but that's over decades of neglect by previous boards to not keep our staff paid at that level they should be. So when we analyzed where we were compared to our neighboring Charles and St. Mary's counties, you know, we determined that our Sheriff's Department was about 14% under where they should be, and that our own staff was 17% under where they should be. And with what's going on today with inflation, we just felt it was vitally important at this time that we find the money to make sure we get our staff compensated appropriately. So there's been some discussion in the public about this significant increase, but I ask that you look back over time and see how long this has taken. So it is significant when you wait as long as we have to make sure they are compensated appropriately. So I think that's all the comments I have at this time. I'm going to turn it back over to Director Strand to go through the presentation.
Thank you. Again, hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Sharon Strand, the Director of Finance and Budget. And again, we'll be presenting the FY23 Commissioner's Budget, which is the second budget in our budget production process. The first one was the staff recommended budget. This is the Commissioner's budget, and then our last part of the budget process will be the adoption of our budget, which is scheduled for June 7th. Next slide, please. This is just an overview of our agenda this evening and the speakers that will be up here to speak on their specific topics. Next slide, please. So again, we're here to discuss the FY23 Commissioner's budget and provide information to the public. We appreciate the feedback from the public, and towards the end of the presentation, there will be an open session for you all to present your public comment. Our local laws require this hearing. We are also here to satisfy the public hearing requirements of the constant yield tax rate, which I'll present on another slide. Tonight, we will be presenting at a very high level. If you want additional details, please feel free to consult the budget document, which is located on our website. Or if you need additional details, you can always contact Finance and Budget, and we should be able to help you and walk you through. Next slide, please. The rules for the hearing. So the rules for the hearing are, if you're speaking as an individual, you will have 2 minutes to speak. If you're speaking on behalf of an organization, you'll have 5 minutes to speak. If you'd like to sign up to speak, there is a sign-up sheet located in the back of the hearing room. If you are watching or listening on the county website and you wish to comment via telephone, there are instructions on our home page under Upcoming Events, Public Hearings. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the constant yield rate is the rate that a jurisdiction would need to impose to generate the same amount of property tax revenue in the upcoming fiscal year, which is our fiscal year 2023, as it did in the current year, fiscal year 2022. Those two rates are different because of changes in property assessments. In a rising or increasing assessment environment, we would have to lower our property tax rate to keep our property income, our county revenues, the same. This portion of our hearing, again, is required by the state of Maryland. If you live in Chesapeake Beach or North Beach, you have a different rate. It's called a tax differential rate. Why is this? The commissioners acknowledge that the town taxes are paid, and the services that are provided by the towns require this lower rate. The commissioners set a tax differential amount. Currently, it is at 0.336. You can see that the difference between the county's proposed tax rate of 0.927 and the 0.591 proposed rate for the towns. Next slide, please. So how do we plan for this? This is a huge number, $4.6 billion. And I've seen it all the way up to 7 and even higher than that. But this recent data that I have of the 4.6 million was supported by usspending.gov as of March 2022. There's never been a federal stimulus like this, and no one knows what the current and future impact has applied for the second half of the stimulus money, which we should receive shortly. What are the longer term impacts? Inflation. Everything we do is sensitive to inflation, salary costs and commodity costs, to refer to a couple. The Consumer Price Index, or CPI, increased by 8.54% over the past 12 months. The March acceleration was the fastest pace since January of 1982. World events. How will the Russian invasion of Ukraine impact the U.S. markets? Employment. How will the stimulus money impact our future returns? Future interest rates. This is a big one for us. Property values are impacted by mortgage rates and borrowing costs. As of May 2022, the Federal Reserve increased our interest rates by 0.5 basis points, after already seeing another increase in March of 2022. This was the first increase since December of 2018 and will have an impact on the county's revenues and our citizens. The current interest rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage is 5.1%, an increase of 1.87%. Based on the average home value of $385,000, this could potentially increase the monthly mortgage payment by $350. These are all questions that staff has monitored as we prepared for the Commissioner's budget. Next slide, please. The general fund budget. In the general fund, we collect our property taxes and income taxes and account for the money that was collected. Calvert County has some of the lowest income and property tax rates in the state. This budget presents a flat tax rate. As you may recall, the commissioners lowered the tax rate in the past 2 years. How do we use your money? For education, mainly to fund the public schools, but also the College of Southern Maryland. For public safety, the Sheriff's Office, the Detention Center, the 911 Center, and Career EMS. These are just some of the many parts that help keep Calvert County safe. For roads, Public Works maintains about 470 miles of county roads. For the communities, there are libraries, senior centers, parks, museums, and other services. Next slide, please. The general fund revenue, as Commissioner Hans pointed out earlier, is $335,287,193. In the chart, you will see that over 90% of the general fund revenues come from property and income taxes. This has been a constant to at least back to 2010. That means 9 out of every 10 of the general fund dollars I'm speaking about tonight comes from these two sources. Next slide, please. This is our income tax forecast. Due to all the uncertainty in income tax, it has been budgeted very conservatively, but recent meetings with the State Revenue Office, the outlook for income tax is very strong. Remember that this money comes from a roughly 41,000 tax returns filed by our residents and distributed by the state to the county. Next slide, please. What does our future hold? I think everyone would like to know the answer to that at this point. But as stated earlier, staff will be keeping a close eye on our revenues and our sources to continue to limit building of expenses into our base budget. In 2018, our general fund revenues increased by $32.5 million. The dark blue portion of that bar shows that $25 million of that increase is related to the Dominion pilot program. Moving forward on the timeline, you can see the numbers changing, but the same concept applies. Historical data shows increases from 18 to 21. And 22, the budget begins to decrease for the Dominion revenues as well in FY24 to FY26. FY24 is when the fixed payment for Dominion becomes a tax credit. This revenue will be based on the assessed value of the facility. The state is in the process of assessing the facility, and staff will continue to work with the state and Dominion on the assessment. Next slide, please. This graph reports on the total increase in general fund revenues from the prior year. The general fund revenues are primarily property and income taxes, like we covered on the previous slide. You'll see that FY21 was the largest increase in this period of $32.9 million. All the prior years on this graph show a year-over-year increase until fiscal year 2022, which shows a decrease of $21.3 million over fiscal year 21 actuals. This is mostly due to lowered expenses during the pandemic and the inflow of the federal stimulus money. The past 2 years, in continuing through FY23, we are seeing a very different environment to what recent history has been, and staff will continue to update projections based on available data. Next up is Beth, who will be covering the general fund expenditures.
Thank you, Sharon. Good evening. I am Beth Richmond, Deputy Director of Finance and Budget. Sharon spoke to you about the general fund revenues, and I will speak to you about the general fund expenditures. Oh, sorry, next slide. There we go. So this is a representation of the general fund expenditures. For every dollar the county spends out of the general fund, 46 cents goes to our county schools, 37 cents is spent on operating expenses, and 9 cents is for pensions, insurance, and debt service associated with capital improvements. Then the remaining 8 cents covers transfers to other county funds and county agencies, such as the election board, the health department, and the library, to name a few. Next slide. The general fund expenditures increased $7.3 million over the adopted budget for last year, and this slide shows you the top 5 changes. All county departments will show an increase to their salary expenses, as this budget contains a market adjustment, a cost of living adjustment, a step, and a restorative step for staff hired on or before July 1, 2011. As Sharon mentioned, the county is also experiencing increases in expenditures associated with the economy, for example, contracted services and fuel. In this chart, you will see the largest increase, 59%, is for technology services, or TS. In addition to the expenditure increases I just mentioned, the increase at TS includes an investment in a new financial system to replace one that has been in service 17 plus years. This new system will increase integration between departments and provide opportunities to streamline activities and increase productivity. Another initiative is the centralization of IT expenses, which moved expenses from individual departments to TS. This change will provide greater visibility and transparency and will standardize technology purchases. Standardization will ensure the proper vetting of software to improve our cybersecurity stance and ensure TS has the ability to maintain all hardware purchased for the county. Another FY23 initiative is to move custodians and maintenance workers under the general services umbrella. Efficiencies will be created by grouping staff who perform similar work together. In this budget, we have added 8 EMTs to the Career EMS department. To ensure our citizens get the medical help they need, we continue to expand our staff to supplement our amazing volunteers. Next slide. The next area I would like to discuss is the changes from the staff recommended budget that we presented in March to the Commissioner's budget being presented tonight. For both revenues and expenditures, we've revised and refined our estimates based on current information. For revenue, the significant changes were in recordation tax, insurance reimbursement, and a transfer from capital projects. For expenditures, the salary increase was detailed on the previous slide. To help offset some of the expenditure increases, several capital projects were realigned in fiscal year 22, which reduced the fiscal year 23 transfer. During the Commissioner's budget cycle, it was requested that the funding for the Board of Education be reduced to the state-required maintenance of effort. You will hear more about the BOE on the next slide and when Dr. Curry speaks later in the presentation. Next slide. We just reviewed what happened between the staff recommended budget and the Commissioner's budget. So now we will go through some of the items that you will see reflected in the adopted budget. As Sharon mentioned, the Board of County Commissioners will vote on the adoption of the budget on Tuesday, June the 7th. For revenue, the significant change was in other revenues, which is mostly made up of an insurance reimbursement from savings in our benefit plans. After recent meetings with the Board of Ed that included discussions on the superintendent's budget, the BOCC has decided to fund the Board of Ed at $141 million for FY23. This is $6.6 million over maintenance of effort. That completes the review of the general fund. I will now turn things over to Mary Beth Cook, Director of Planning and Zoning.
Thank you, Beth. Good evening. I'm Mary Beth Cook, Director of Planning and Zoning, and I'm going to be talking about some fee increases that we're proposing with this budget. The fees are charged to offset staff time and expended county resources to provide a fiscal benefit to the county and its citizens. The current fee schedule was updated in the last budget cycle in 2022, and previously in 2021 we did a major overhaul. This year we're only doing increases for the Board of Appeals and one new fee for inspections and permits. The Board of Appeals fees have not been increased since 2002. So we're bringing those up to, we did an analysis of St. Mary's County and Charles County. We're still going to be less than them, but it's time to update those. And the major reason that we're doing this increase is because the advertising costs have increased significantly since the paper has merged and only comes out once a week. We've seen I didn't do the percentage, but I know that it's almost doubled. Next slide, please. The complete list of fees, including the proposed revisions, can be found in the FY 2023 budget under Fees and Tax Rate Appendix, and it's the Planning and Zoning fees start on page 511. So as I said, the Board of Appeals fees are being increased, and those are fees for variances, special exception, alleged errors, towers where they are special exceptions, and then I also mentioned we're adding one fee to inspections and permits, and that is a commercial permit application fee. Last year we added an application fee for residential permits, so this year we're doing it for commercial permits as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel Griffith. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Good evening. I'm Rachel Griffith, Fiscal Officer, and I'm going to present the budgets for the Water and Sewer and Solid Waste Funds. These two funds are enterprise funds, which mean they are run like a business and are expected to pay for their own operations. These funds operate on revenues earned. Water and Sewer charges capital connection and user fees, while Solid Waste charges tip fees, excise taxes, and solid waste fees for its customers. Water and Sewer serves the major town centers in Prince Frederick and Solomons, as well as many smaller communities throughout the county. There are 19 water systems and 7 wastewater systems in the county. The Water and Sewer Fund summary budget is shown on the screen. This budget is based on the rates currently in effect. The budget increased 9%, or $11,239 over fiscal year 22. Looking at revenues, charges for services increased by 6%, which is a result of our county-wide meter replacement program. More readable meters translate into more revenue. Capital connections is forecasted to remain flat for fiscal year 23. Water and Sewer has a general fund revenue and use of prior year fund balance line items, which is helping to offset the increase to expenditures. For expenses, salaries and benefits increase is due to salary adjustments as stated on previous slides. The operating line item is flat with fiscal year 22. Capital outlays decrease is due to a reduction of large purchase requests. The maintenance reserve line is to help fund large one-time projects. Next slide, please. The Solid Waste Fund is used to run the county landfill at Appeal and all of the 6 resident convenience centers or compactor sites. This fund's budget is increasing by 7%, or $9,836. The charges for services revenue increase is related to the tipping fees and solid waste fees, which is increased annually by CPI. Solid waste has a general fund revenue and use of prior year fund balance line items, which is helping to offset the increase to expenditures. The expense increase for salaries and benefits is due to the salary adjustments, again as stated on previous slides. The debt increase is due to the 2021 bond sale for the Appeal Transfer Station and the Barstow Convenience Center. Equipment reserve are funds that are set aside for future large purchases, which decreased from fiscal year 22. Next slide, please. This slide is intended to cover the planned increases in the solid waste fee structure. There is a small tip fee increase included in this budget for fiscal year 23. However, there will be a public hearing soon regarding an additional rate increase based on a new contract with our hauling and disposal supplier. You can also find these rates on the Schedule of Fees page in the budget document. In addition to the tip fee revenues, county businesses and residents pay a solid waste fee to support the fund, which is billed on the county tax bill. The plan is to raise this fee by $3 per user, from $148 to $151 to fund improvements to the recycling program. Now I would like to turn the presentation over to Veronica.
Good evening. I'm Veronica Atkinson, and I'm the Capital Projects Analyst. This evening, I will be reviewing the 6-year Capital Improvement Plan, or CIP. This table breaks down the 6-year expenses by functional department, listed to the far left of the table. The 6-year total is $363,207,478. Even though the CIP covers a period of 6 years, only the first year of the CIP, FY23, highlighted here in yellow, with a total of $51,762,496, is adopted or funded by the board. The remaining 5 years are for financial planning purposes. Next slide, please. This table focuses on the FY23 CIP in the Commissioner's budget. The far left of the table lists each functional department, and the column in yellow represents their total requested expenses. To the right of the total expenses is a breakdown of the revenues. This shows how each functional department plans to pay for projects in FY23. The pay-go column is showing a funding transfer back to the general fund. This represents the funding from the capital projects that were realigned in FY22. The top chart reflects the general fund, with a total request of $49,264,496. Below the general fund is the enterprise fund's revenue breakdown. The FY23 total request is $2,498,000. As Rachel explained, the enterprise funds are self-supporting funds. The revenues are based upon the fees received from the users of the utilities, water, sewer, solid waste. These fees also support the enterprise fund's capital projects. This concludes Finance and Budget's presentation, and I'd like to ask Sharon Strand to come back up.
Thank you, Veronica. Next slide, please. This document came from us from the Board of Education, and this reflects the additional $6.6 million that the commissioners asked staff to include in the adopted budget. Next slide, please. So the floor will be now open for public comment, starting with those attending in person and then followed by our virtual callers. I'll hand it over to John Norris, our county attorney, and he'll read the rules of the public hearing comment section.
Thank you, Sharon. John Norris, County Attorney. The board has adopted Resolution 6-89 in order to maintain the order and decorum of the governmental process. A copy of that was on the table in the back as you walked in, and a copy is here in front of me. The floor has been open for public comment from persons in the meeting room. You may begin making your way to the microphone. Then those joining us virtually. Those who are joining us virtually, if you wish to speak and you're on the telephone, please press *9. If you are on a computer, please use the raise your hand function. Virtual speakers will be identified by the last 4 digits or your screen name and unmuted one at a time. Now we're asking those who wish to speak to please identify yourself, and whether speaking as an individual or the designated representative of a group, you'll be provided 2 minutes or 5 minutes respectively.
All right, so the first speaker that has signed up is Sheriff Mike Evans, and he's a designated speaker for the Sheriff's Office.
Commissioners, I'm here to say thank you. Thank you for a staff budget of finance, working with members of the Sheriff's Office, Lord Kent, Colonel David Dow, Sergeant Phelps, Detective DeFelice, members of the Correction Detention Center. Well done. You came up with something fair and equitable for all county employees. I know it started with public safety, but it's such a wise decision to include all the county employees with this decision. Done a great job. It's a great working relationship, and all I can say is thank you very much. Well done. I salute you.
Thank you. The next speaker I would like to call up is Margaret Dunkel, and she's speaking as a designated speaker.
Hi, I'm Margaret Dunkel, Chair of the Harriet Elizabeth Brown Commemoration Task Force. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to urge continued funding for the Harriet Elizabeth Brown Community Center and Park in the fiscal 2023 county budget. First of all, I want to express my appreciation for all of your past support for this essential facility, from allocating $6 million PAYGO funds last year to setting aside $1.5 million from the Federal CARES Act and approving the master plan last month. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But on April the 12th, you voted to pull the funding rug out from under Harriet Elizabeth Brown, the Community Center and Park. The center went from having 20% of needed funding to 0. Harriet Elizabeth Brown is a county treasurer, a leader who stood for equal pay for African American teachers in 1937, long before any of us, even me, was born. She deserves our respect, and the community center and park named after her deserve funding from the county she represented so honorably. If Miss Brown were alive today, she would be painfully forced to give you an F, a failing grade right now. But she was also a kind teacher, and so you now have an opportunity for a makeup assignment to turn this F into an A by restoring funding. We as citizens and voters realize that you, our elected representatives, must balance priorities. And we hope you realize that a viable community center and park for Prince Frederick is a top priority. The town center concept has been a core of county planning for decades. We have seen the growth of town centers, including Prince Frederick. With that, we also need a corresponding growth of services and recreational facilities for our citizens. Please do not leave Prince Frederick behind. Funding for the Harriet Elizabeth Brown Community Center and Park is your chance to earn this A from Ms. Brown, to deliver on your past promises, and to ensure Prince Frederick becomes a viable community center. Our community needs this facility for lovers of the outdoors, as well as for lovers of the indoor sports like pickleball and basketball, community classes, trails, playgrounds, meeting rooms, farmers markets, and more. It will serve the community members of all ages and make us an age-friendly community. As of today, you have unfortunately taken back the $6 million PAYGO money from last year and have reallocated the $1.5 million in CARES Act money, if my understanding is correct, from the Harriet Elizabeth Brown Community Center and Park. Yeah, this much needed facility is going to cost more than we thought. But if you don't fund this right now, if you don't make this funding ship float right now, the need only becomes greater and greater every day. Costs will continue to go up. The master plan you've approved will grow stale. And the 27 acres you've already bought, $2 million off of Dares Beach Road, will be idle without people enjoying it. This is not worthy of Ms. Brown's legacy, and it's not okay for the citizens of Calvert County who value and need great outdoor and recreational activities. You did one U-turn, as I understand it, on April the 12th, when you pulled the funding rug out from Ms. Brown's Community Center and Park. And we're asking that you do another U-turn today, so you are again headed in the right direction to complete this project. With your final vote on the budget on June the 7th, please put back funding for this important facility. As my friend and colleague Pat Nutter so eloquently says, we need to work together to make sure the Harriet Elizabeth Brown Community Center and Park is shovel-ready before we are. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Guthrie, sorry. Sorry about that.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Guthrie Smith, and I'm speaking individually. I could speak for a lot of organizations, but I'm going to speak for myself. So I've been president of the Calvert Collaborative for Children and Youth and many other organizations, and we've fought for swimming pools, etc. I want to thank you for what you've done and what you're trying to do. You can't go wrong by providing a safe, appropriate activities and space for youth and for elderly, for all people in the community. And thank you for purchasing the land. Please, please do everything you can to see that the Harriet E. Brown Community Center and Park become a reality as soon as possible. I know there are competing priorities, but this is really, really important because you can touch and you can shape and support many of the traits that need to be developed and many of the attitudes and behaviors we need to be developed in society now. So keep doing what you're doing. Make sure that you have a place for people to let off steam, work and play cooperative with others, support teamwork, keep people here who move to other places, keep the mind and body and soul and activity, involved. So again, please restore funding to keep Harriet E. Brown Community Center on the road to development as soon as possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Carol Booker, speaking as an individual.
I live here in Calvert County, and I would also like to speak on behalf of the Harriet Elizabeth Brown Center. I remember quite well, and maybe many of you do too, the applause, the cheers, the outpouring of support when the commission last year voted to approve this center. And now, if you take it away and push it back, you are pulling the rug out from under the people who supported you and who patted you or your predecessors on the back for all that you did. I look around the room and I see a really large number of women here, and some women, all women, who presented the budget and who obviously do a great job with numbers. And I wonder how many of you know that women across the board will not reach pay equity in this country during my lifetime. And I'm not that old. I don't remember the year that it's predicted. I didn't have a chance to look it up before I came. But I remember the last time I looked at it, I said, my goodness, I won't be alive when women finally achieve pay equity in this country. But Harriet Elizabeth Brown started that struggle. When she brought the lawsuit for pay equity as a teacher. Well, a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, the White House Correspondents Association honored a woman, a black woman, who, when she was hired as a reporter in 1947, was offered 50% of what the men who were interested in the job were offered. She had no choice. She didn't know that. Harriet Elizabeth Brown knew she could bring a lawsuit.
Please wrap up.
I want to wrap this up. So, you have two things going here. You voted in your wisdom and your vision for a center. The community was elated. So don't back off that. Don't make that U-turn. And then there's also the name you propose to put on it. We have a community, my goodness, this county government with all of these women doing this wonderful job. When we weren't allowed to vote until 1919 because it was thought we didn't have any brains, and still a lot of people think we can't handle numbers. We can handle numbers very well. So please reconsider and put that back in the budget. Thank you.
I have no more public speakers in person, John.
Okay, there is a individual who is signed up on Zoom.
I didn't get a chance to sign up. Can I ask
You're welcome to present comments. I'm not sure questions.
Okay, comments. On page 11.
Ms. Gowans, if you please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Myra Gowans. I'm representing Calvert Citizens United. Let me ask you, and thanks for your presentation. It is really illuminating. But on page 11, you're stating that there's a credit back to Dominion. How does that get taken care of, that credit? How does that mean that they're getting a credit in dollars or a credit on, I just wonder, how is that credit being transferred to them?
I think most appropriate for public hearings is public comment. Certainly if you have questions.
Well, that's fine. That's fine, but I can call you, okay? I'll call you and we can discuss it, all right? Thank you.
Caller with last four digits 2803, you have your hand raised. You may press *6 to unmute yourself. Please identify yourself and whether speaking as an individual or the designated representative of a group.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Joseph Cormier, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself this evening. I don't know where to start. You guys have done a really great job putting together a budget, but I wish that you and the Board of Education could get your head out of the sand and start cooperating. It's really frustrating to see the back and forth and the back and forth. A hungry student is not a child ready to learn. A hungry student is not a child ready to participate in the classroom. Please do everything you can to keep breakfast and lunch free for all students. We don't make kids pay for the bathroom or the playground or the library or the art room. We shouldn't have a policy that has a secondary lunch for kids of a second class. It causes trauma every day, and it doesn't have a purpose. We can be leaders in this and step up and have a policy that says every child will get a free lunch every day. We've done it for the last 2 years. Food costs are going up, but we haven't seen food waste increase. The schools are doing a really great job of making sure that kids who want lunch are getting it, and it's just really important for our community to put the resources where they can be the most good, and that's in the schools. So please, please, please work with the Board of Education and the new superintendent to make that happen. Thank you so much.
There are no other hands raised.
All right. Thank you, John. Now, I'll turn it back over to Commissioner Hans.
So, any discussion? Comments? Motion?
Mr. President, I move that we leave the record open until the close of business on Monday, June 6, 2022, and direct that staff return thereafter for consideration of public comment and decision.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, for the record, I would just like to thank you all for your perseverance in fighting for this center. And I stand behind you. And I would make the recommendation that we take funds out of our rainy day fund to put the money back as a sign of good faith that we will try to move forward, even though costs are a little bit too high right now. At least we have the funds there. We know we're on track. I agree with you that the land's been purchased. And I just like to see it stay on track because it's not just for the kids, just like you said, it's for the elderly. It's for the whole community. When I grew up, my parents kept us in every sports. I played baseball, basketball, football. And out of 5 children, not one of us got into drugs or had alcohol problems. It's the best thing you can do for your community to invest back in the kids. So I applaud you all for your perseverance in this. And we all had tough decisions. We had to get our employees caught up. So I understand, we had to do that, but I don't want to see that money go away. I want to keep moving forward with it.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight and those that called in. We do appreciate and take into consideration all your comments. Just once again, I want to reiterate how hard of a process this is. When we started this process last year, I think Director Strand was proposing 6.6 or a little over $6 million in new revenues, and we had budget requests at that time of over $20 million. And to sit in this chair and listen to department heads talk about their needs and have to say no. Last year, we cut 3% across the board from all of our departments. This year, there are cuts not across the board, but there are cuts to individual departments to make this budget balanced. So it's not an easy task, and you know, any day's a new day, and revenues may come, revenues may go, but it's the process that we have. So once again, I just want to thank all of you for coming out tonight, and record's open until June the 6th. So if you have any further comments, you have an opportunity to make those. Otherwise, motion to adjourn.
So moved, sir.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Good night, everyone.
Thank